admitting that you were in control, and that's a really difficult thing to do.
Do you think tenure has anything to do with which teachers are willing to report and which teachers aren't?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So for people watching this, if they don't know what tenure is, Kandyce, do you want to explain how tenure works?
Okay. So when you start working for a district, you have so many years that you work as a temporary teacher, meaning that at the end of the year, they can let you go or they can keep you. It's their decision. They don't have to give you a reason. And if there's an opening, they can keep you. If not, they just let you go and you go find another job. It takes multiple years.
Welcome to another episode of On the Couch, where we talk about real issues facing education and the problem and potentially the solution. I'm Angie.
I'm Kim.
I'm Kandyce.
And we are Flair Educators. We're three teachers who are still in the classroom, duking it out, doing our best to change education and to influence and inspire our students every day. And today our topic is
violence against teachers.
I know, that's a rough topic.
But we have to talk about it because, as Kim has taught us, 2023 is getting extremely violent towards teachers. Do you want to kind of...
Well, we can talk about not just violence, students on students, but teachers are now at record, teachers are being at record numbers threatened, assaulted, disabled, and killed right now. The violence is pervasive, and I know many teachers who are afraid. They're afraid to go to work.
So you're saying right now, you're talking to teachers who are actively in classrooms who are actually afraid of going to their jobs because student violence has escalated so much and they can feel that on their campuses. And it's not just breaking up fights or kids against each other, it's actually that they worry that the student would hurt them.
Yes, teachers have been threatened. They've been sexually harassed. A lot of teachers are afraid to report it to administration. I think these are old numbers, and the violence and attacks has increased dramatically, but facts from 2016, 1 in 5 teachers doesn't even report the threat or the act of violence to administration because they feel that they'll be blamed. And this happens often to teachers, that when a student misbehaves or a teacher is threatened, administration very often will support the child and not the teacher.
Well,
which blows my mind.
Right? You're in the classroom and you are expected to be, the person in charge, and so admitting to something like that happening,
the state of California says teachers should be a temp for 2 years. After that, they should be moved to probe 1, and then the next year probe 2.
Yeah. As a tenure teacher, you have that security knowing that there will be a position for you within your district. If enrollment goes down at your site, then there will be a position somewhere else in the district, and it's kind of like a promise of the district that you will have a job.
And for non-tenure teachers, in every state I've worked at, and I've worked in Florida, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and California. Did I mention Montana? In all of those states, it's usually 2 years for tenure, and in all of those states, they can let a teacher without tenure go at any time for any reason.
They could not like your color of your hair, or the way you laugh, or the shoes you wore yesterday.
Well, I don't know. I have three friends right now who have not in our district, but who have not been asked to return in other districts. And all 3 of those friends have really good evaluations, great relationships with their students, thought everything was going great. And all 3 of them, the administration is refusing to tell them why they're not being asked back.
Yeah, I've been in that position.
I've been in that position too.
And it hurts. It's hard.
And a lot of times they'll get that and then they have to continue teaching the rest of the year. And so I think it causes trepidation when teachers are having issues, maybe a student's coming on to them, maybe a student's threatening them. They might not want to share that with the admin because they might not want to put a target on their back or seem like they can't handle their classes. And so that might keep them from reporting behavior that they otherwise, I think, would report.
Well, and that it's not just the lack of support sometimes from administration. I've had some great administrators, but it's not just that, it's the parents. I was doing a fun activity and I'm helping a table group, and a student decided to throw a pen, hit a student almost in the eye, and it had already bruised. Sent him to the office, and it was reported that when the nurse called mom, the first thing out of her mouth was, "What was the teacher doing?" And you're watching us and you're a teacher,
Everything, you're doing everything all at once, all the time.
You can't control what the kids do and don't do at every moment.
Especially
it's impossible.
when there's 32, 35,
Yes,
36,
Yes.
sometimes 40 kids in your class and one adult.
And speaking of parents, it's often, teachers have been yelled at by parents and accused of things that they didn't do. We've had parents trying to get teachers fired for things. The power of the kids right now, they know that if they work hard, they can figure out a way to basically entrap a teacher and get them fired. And I know that parents have gone off on teachers and administration. I've never seen the behaviors from the students and the parents like we're seeing now, unfortunately.
Parents coming in and literally calling our professional, good administrators who are just trying to hear their concerns, and they're literally cussing at them, calling them names, flipping them off, throwing fits, and these are the parents. And so across America right now, we're seeing an escalation in student behavior and attacks, verbally, physically, against teachers, but we're also seeing parents both supporting those students with the attacks, but B, doing it themselves. Then when the admin tries to come in and protect the teacher, then they turn those behaviors on the admin, and there's no functional laws that really protect our admin or us from assaults from parents or students. Are there that you're aware of?
I know that we can press charges.
There is
something
ed code.
happens.
There is
There's
ed code that I know in California, if teachers are threatened or they're afraid or they're attacked, they're required by state law to report it to the police.
If the child is
And if they,
well,
and if they don't, then the administration needs to, either the teacher or administration. And if it doesn't happen, actually, the teacher can be fined.
oh, that's interesting.
And I think a lot of people
So
don't know
a lot
about
of-
that.
And
Yeah.
who are you supposed to report that to exactly?
The police department.
So is that just for a threat, or is that if you're actually physically attacked, or what's the threshold? Because I feel like probably teachers watching have had multiple incidents where people, hopefully not, hopefully you've never had any of this happen.
If they're physically assaulted, it's a no-brainer, right? But I can see that
The verbal.
the verbal threat, the teacher has to decide, does it seem like a viable threat or not? Is it real or not? And that's tough. I mean, just locally, there's been 2 bomb threats at high schools. The police have to investigate it. And if a student says that a lot of it is happening and being sparked on social media, and I think in general, if there's a threat, it has to be investigated. And sometimes Child Protective Services will go out to the house along with the police.
I can't believe how much I'm seeing teachers getting attacked by students on the news right now. It's
absolutely unbelievable. You feel like you create a safe community in your classroom and these things are happening.
Well, and it's when you watch the videos, like I've cried watching a teacher get punched and punched in the head because he was just following school policy and asking a student to hand over his phone. But what even makes me sicker than the violence is the other students videotaping the act of violence. There's a video of that happening. It was a high school teacher. Another teacher was chased down a hall and attacked from behind because she took the student's Nintendo. I think it was a Nintendo Switch away from him.
It's almost like the kids don't even feel like they're part of it in real life. Like they're watching from outside. There's like a huge disconnect.
Called desensitization.
Yeah.
And I have a theory on it that because of COVID and social media and lack of supervision of students during that time, you see it all over social media where there's just this lack of compassion,
Empathy.
morals,
Yeah.
values, and empathy.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
And we
It's
know
sad.
that was a really difficult time.
Mhm.
Like if you're a working parent and your kids are home, like you can't control what they do all the time you're not home. But it's those conversations that you have with them once you are with them.
Well, I think one of the concerns is that, yes, if you're a good parent, that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But at least at this point, 10 to 20% of our students are not. There's a great meme. Hopefully, we can put it in right now. But it's the guy in the van that holds up the students and what it used to be like and how it is now. Have you seen that? I'll show it. It's really good. But so there are assumptions about parenting that used to be the norm. But then again, it used to be the norm that you'd go home and watch 90s sitcoms. And in those sitcoms, there would be examples of parenting where they would sit down and have those lessons with the kids. Mm-hmm. And even if the kids didn't have parents like that, they could watch parents like that. And so there were every show I watched growing up, Growing Pains was one of them.
The Brady Bunch.
The Cosby Show has been ruined, but I loved The Cosby Show growing up, right? I thought it had some of the best lessons. It was my favorite show. And all of those, I love Raymond, those are all functionally great families with good morals that work through problems every day. Our kids aren't getting that kind of positive media like they used to.
They have, reality shows?
My teenagers, I teach 8th grade, my teenagers literally go home and watch on different platforms of social media, including dark web, people kill each other or kill themselves.
What?
And then they come in and tell me about it.
Oh my God.
That is.
So when we're talking about desensitization and why it's a problem, we can't, I think, continue to pretend that parents and society are going to hand students these morals. I mean, look at Suicide Squad, for example. The high profile movies are, or the Joker, they're really creating heroes out of villains and creating mixed messages about what a good person is, how a good person acts in society, that you can have a good or a bad person. And with those mixed messages, our younger kids don't understand the nuance of that. They can't, they're not adults, and yet they're consuming adult material, but their brains aren't developed enough for that. And so we as society have to take some responsibility for that. But also, I think getting on to like what we can do to solve problems is we're going to have to actually teach SEL in a meaningful way in the classrooms.
In a way that the kids can apply to their lives, not just like, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? But if you have this problem that you're with your friends, like what do you do? And like real life situations.
Or asking them, how do we decrease violence? Let's look at factors. Let's problem solve together. What do you think causes people to be angry? What do you do when you're angry? How do you resolve conflict? We need to go back to conflict resolution and what makes a good person, why it's important to get along with people, why good people can have disagreements, why violence tears down societies. And we're going to have to invest in robust SEL programs that aren't like, most of the SEL programs that I've dealt with or been handed are very surface level. Mm-hmm. And they're very much about habits, and they're very much about how to create friends and how to be happy. And they're not getting at deeper issues about violence or trauma. And so then it doesn't actually get us to the root problem.
Right. It's such a different world in the last 3 years. And there's so many more different kinds of influences the kids have. And it's really hard to be a parent right now. and, you know, combat those influences and all the social media and everything.
And you know what, the violence not only is increasing, but the perpetrators are getting younger and younger. I know there's a lawsuit right now where a teacher was shot by a 6-year-old. And administration, I mean, there's a clear trail of a pattern of violent behavior from the student. And from the article I read, administration was warned that the student had a gun on campus. They checked his backpack, checked the room. They said, oh, there's no gun. Well, the student had it in his sweatshirt pocket and shot her. So until...
So unbelievable that a 6-year-old would do that. So, you know, I feel like we just need to question more, even though it feels like we shouldn't have to.
As a society, we have to come up with solutions, and it's not an easy, it's a complex problem.
So I think we have to talk about what we can change and what we can't change. We can lobby the legislators, and that's what Flair is going to be doing, so stick with us. We're going to actually be looking at creating a petition, and please join us in this process to create laws that protect schools, protect teachers, and do get us to stop being so naive, because I think a lot of the problems that are happening in schools is that legislators and administrators are very naive about the reality and the risk, and that's not helping us. And then the next thing that we can change is we have power over our classroom and our school site. And I feel strongly that fear is never the answer. And when we give in to fear and we're afraid of our students, then we can't create the kind of connection and relationship that allow them to heal. And so frequently, I train wild horses, and wild horses get very afraid. And when they're afraid, they lash out. When they're scared, when they're insecure, well, any horse will do that, actually. But as most horse trainers know, we're not afraid of wild horse. I'm not afraid of a wild horse. I'm not afraid of a horse that's been neglected. I'm not afraid of a horse that's been abused. There's only one type of horse that I'm truly afraid of to train. And I've trained horses that have, I had one horse, he was a paint stallion. The trainers before me, he broke one's leg, one collarbone, and the other one 3 ribs. And I was the last stop before this horse was euthanized. And he tried with me. I mean, he went ballistic. My dad had him ponied to our big Clydesdale, and he reared back and forward, and he mounted, and my dad jumped on the fence, and it was this crazy, experience. But my Clydesdale, he just put his head down and kept going until the horse finally walked, and I didn't get off. And literally 3 months later, a 4-year-old little girl rode him at a competition and won first place.
Oh my goodness.
And he sold for $10,000 as a kid's horse.
Wow.
But his problem was not that he was abused, was not that he was neglected. His problem was he was spoiled. He had been passed from owners who gave him everything he wanted. He was this very pretty paint stallion, gorgeous. He moved really fluidly, and so every owner he had gave him treats and never said no and never had boundaries. And so he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing until he was literally biting at people, kicking at people, mounting other horses while I was on top of him. I mean, he had no kind of way to rein himself in. And I think in education, it's time for us as teachers with our co-teachers, we can create clear boundaries for these students who their type of, I don't know what you would call it, but their type of life experience is that they've never had boundaries. And so they push them farther and farther and farther in a form of security to say, like, when will you hold me back? When will you say no? When will you make me feel safe? And if we're not very consistent, then their behaviors continue to escalate. And I think it's a lack of consistency that's something that we can control at our sites and with our fellow teachers.
So you're saying that students are like horses?
Yes, students are exactly like horses. See our shorts, more coming. I think there's basically no difference. Give them random treats, they're happy, right? You want them to feel less afraid? Play good music. I don't know.
There might be something to that.
But don't pet them, that's not appropriate.
No. They do like carrots.
They
for
do.
students
Yes.
and horses.
Yeah, and oranges, we found out.
And apples.
Mhm. Yeah.
Don't forget the flaming hot Cheetos and Takis.
Maybe not for the horses.
My student said, when you're home, because my horses are in Idaho, when you're home, will you give him a Taki? And I was like, I have one that'll try it. He'll make faces, and it will be very funny, because he'll try anything I put in my mouth. But I think what I am saying is that going back to teacher styles, there are two teacher styles that are very, very gifted at creating boundaries for students. And those are Simply Stylish and Vintage.
Yeah.
And these teachers are fantastic at being consistent, creating clear boundaries, and holding kids accountable. Mm-hmm. And I personally feel like there's been an assault on those teachers. And when we talk about teachers leaving the profession, we're talking about my favorite AP teachers who you had to be in the bell, early for class because every second mattered, and didn't matter how sick you were, you came for that class because you couldn't miss the work in that class, and you worked bell to bell every single time, and they were very, very specific, but I learned so much from those teachers. They're also the kind of teachers that are absolutely no nonsense, and I knew exactly what my boundaries were, and I behaved absolutely perfectly in their classes. Mm-hmm. And I feel like more and more and more in society right now, admin and all the literature, because we know it swings back and forth, right?
The pendulum.
The pendulum
continues,
swings,
yeah.
and right now it's all about caring about the kids and forming relationships, which is good. That's fashionista, and we love that.
Mm-hmm. And engagement. Like, there's a big push for student engagement and collaboration, which is our power dressers and our hippies. Mm-hmm. But there's not an appreciation for the old school teachers that
we need them.
I know.
I'm Simply Stylish, and I vacillate between vintage and that. And it doesn't mean I don't like to have fun with the kids, because I do. But my students know my boundaries. They know the rules, and I think you hit straight up that these type of style of teachers are being rebelled against because of our societal values are changing, and there's a lot of pushback from not all students, but from very specific students who simply go to school and they don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
They literally, there's this push and pull with them, and this teacher style is,
they want to be entertained right now. Mm-hmm. And sometimes learning is not entertaining. Sometimes we have to get down to business and learn things and try things and work really hard. And our Simply Stylish and Vintage teachers are the ones who know exactly how to do that.
And they get the best results. Vintage teachers get the best test results, hands down, because they show jumps in learning. And now we're not saying that every style isn't absolutely important. It is. But we've swung so far on the pendulum one direction that we're literally, I've heard teachers sit and completely slam other teachers for wanting to hold kids accountable. Because right now the in vogue thing to do with parents and some teachers is just to be their friends, and that does not prepare them for life. The tax man is not going to be their friend. Their boss is not going to be their friend. And so if we set them up with that there are no expectations, they feel out of control, and they don't have pride either. Because when a student, I can't believe how much my students' attitudes changed when they started memorizing things for me. I had them at the beginning of the year, because I have a vintage side, I had them at the beginning of the year memorize the states, the capitals, the preamble, and they were these are like failing all their classes but mine kind of students, and they're walking around telling everyone I can.
I'll see them in the hallways. What are you learning in Miss Stevens' class? And they will tell me all the presidents in order, and they will tell me everything about the colonies and everything about what you're learning, and they're so proud of it too.
Think of what that does for their self-esteem, and it just goes to their core, and then it teaches them, I can do this, right? They feel good about themselves, and then they take on more and more.
And they want to learn, and they want to compete to show off, to have the best, to know the most, and they feel like they can contribute. And I would say, I'm being someone, and I'm just going to overshare here, I had open heart surgery when I was very young, when I was 14. And if any of you have had open heart surgery out there, shout out to you or know anyone in your family. You know, all of us, 100% of us, get extreme depression, like severe, severe depression. And when I had depression and everyone wanted to just talk about how I felt, it didn't get better. It wasn't until, yes, I wanted to talk about that with my therapist, and that was important. But in my classes, I needed to be learning and forgetting and moving on, and nothing felt better than to go to school and be carried away with the importance of a science lab and forget my personal life, because that's an important part of healing too. If I have a hard life at home or I have depression, I don't want to be surrounded by that all the time. I need a challenge to rise up to, because people love to strive and be motivated and to find the value in themselves. And I feel like that's our job as teachers. We can create competitions in our classrooms or in our schools or safe places where the kids are really proud of what they're learning. And believe it or not, that actually decreases violence. And how do we know that?
And that's using SEL. I mean, you're using SEL for learning, but not in like a specific way. It's you're addressing their concerns.
It's not a separate curriculum.
Yeah.
It just goes hand in hand with your teaching and the way you set up your classroom and engage the students.
And if you don't believe us, one of the correlations, and it's a loose correlation that we're working on, but we decided to look at the states that struggled the most with suicide and homicide and school violence. And we looked at those 10 states, and no surprise, they're also the worst 10 states for education. And the states that are the safest, where you're least likely to have homicide, burglary, or suicide, are also the top 10.
Oh, and better yet, 66% of inmates do not have a high school education.
We can predict that starting in 3rd grade, whether or not they're going to graduate from high school. Those are 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's scary. Because
Yeah.
I know I've had 6th graders who can't read. They're in 6th grade already.
Yeah, they've gone to school for 6
I have
7
had
years.
12th graders who could not read.
It's not acceptable. It's
But until there's more meaningful ways for us to get assistance, as long as we're responsible for 30 to 35 by ourselves, it's not reasonable to, like, if you're a teacher being like, oh, I can't do all this. No, you can't.
Well, wait, didn't you tell me earlier about Wyoming and their class sizes and their test
yes.
scores?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right?
So I was looking at the data about really safe, like really good schools and really safe states. And almost all of them were in New England, which was no surprise. But then came up one of the states I've taught in, which was Wyoming. We were not only one of the safest states in the country to live in, 3rd, we were also the 3rd best in education according to 2022, and then also still into 2023. And I was like, of course, because in the core subjects in Wyoming, in English and in math, they capped us in high school too. So middle school and high school, we could not have more than, I think it was 22 or 24. I think it was 22. We could not have more than 22 students. So it was completely reasonable for us to teach them to read.
Right.
What a dream!
And
What a dream!
in California, we do have caps, but only for grade 3 and under.
Okay.
They're capped at what, 24?
I think it's 24.
Yeah. And then above that, we're capped at 35. That's 10 more kids in the class. That's
And there are districts in California who are not following that cap outside of the...
because they can pay you. They can
They just
pay,
pay you
per
more.
student.
Yeah.
And you just sign off on it, especially if you're a temporary teacher.
Yes, because you would, 50's fine, whatever.
sure.
I have to keep my
I'll
job.
take as many, right?
I could do it all. I want a job.
I wanted, yeah.
You know, that's-
And younger teachers, they burn out that way too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was going to say that that's something that the unions, I know our union is fighting for, and with the district, and really trying to get our class sizes smaller. And our current administrator put together a plan to make our class sizes much smaller.
Yes.
So we're super excited to see how this goes, and looking forward to next year.
Where we're going to experience what that's
Yeah,
like.
it's going to be exciting.
So, school violence is real. It feels overwhelming. It feels like there's nothing we can do. Lots and lots of teachers are just quitting. We're not going to quit because, you know.
We're in this together.
Yeah, right?
We're in this
So what are some
together.
takeaways that you got out of today that we can control, that we can do, like that anybody watching this video can implement right now to feel better? For me, I have to focus on the learning. I've got to go in, I've got to focus on my students. I cannot say enough about a positive parent phone call. If you have a kid who's really a problem, tell them, okay, be good today, and I'll send a positive text. Can you do that? And they will, and then you send a positive text, and then you wait a couple days, and then you say, hey, I want to catch you off guard, and send something nice to your parents. And then in the second one, I'll call and I'll say, oh my gosh, Jesus was so amazing today, and he totally interacted with me, and he helped me clean up. Can you do something nice? And because the parents have got the positive text, then they'll usually answer the phone, because these are parents who usually won't answer the phone, or I'll send a text if they don't answer. And then by the third or fourth positive text, all of a sudden, the parents start responding to anything I need. So I could say, oh, Jesus was, he has a project due, can you help him at home? And the parent who won't respond to anybody else will be like, oh yeah, I can help with that. Mm-hmm. And so it starts to change the message. And it's exactly what you would do with a wild horse, or what you would do.
Back to horses again.
You catch them doing something positive, and don't forget to reward the positivity. And the more extreme the situation, the more important that is. But also, you need to have clear and consistent boundaries about how to keep yourself and your students safe. Mm-hmm. And you need to create a plan at your school with other teachers. If your admin won't help you, you've got to do it with other teachers.
Band together. Yeah.
And then hopefully your admin will help you. But teachers can turn a school around on their own, and you can lead. You can change. And if you can't, as somebody who's taught for so long, move schools.
Yes, find somewhere that you feel appreciated and protected and safe.
Yeah, before you quit the profession, change schools.
Every school is so different.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. I wanted to say on a positive note too, not just phone calls. I try to make it a habit to send postcards. Our school has postcards made, and just write a note to the student, and the response is incredible. You now have taken the time, and the student, if they didn't feel valued before that, they feel valued, they're connected with you, and they're more engaged because of it, because I took the time to do that.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea that, like, where your focus goes, the energy flows. And when everybody's afraid and it's feeling so negative, just refocusing. Some days, like when I'm really down in teaching, I'll have them work and I'll say, okay, I'm sending positive texts today. And I'll walk around and just start sending positive texts, and the kids will just light up. Mm-hmm. And it can just change my mood too, because it's a form of gratitude where I'm not focused on the one kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the parent communication is so important. I've had angry parents before, and I'd get anxiety about, I got to call them, I got to talk to them. But I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, when I have that conversation with the parent about their student's poor behavior, or what the student reported to the parent that I said or I did, the parents 9 times out of 10 are on my side and are supportive. And so I've turned a negative situation into a positive, and that feels great to be able to do that.
And that one, I just totally agree with that, Kim, that was so good. That one that's when you need to start talking to the team of teachers. That's when the team of teachers might need to call that parent in, or the school psychologist, or it's hard, I know, and it takes time, but it really can make a campus safe, and it can really start to create systematic change, I think.
Well, and in doing that, the parent feels like you value their opinion. A lot of times, especially in the middle and high school, parents don't know how to help in the classrooms. They don't know, they can't volunteer like they could in the elementary schools. There's no room parent and all of those roles, and they don't know what to do. Plus, the kids are, middle school and high school, and they're different too.
Yeah. It really helps when you talk to the parents. You need to paint a picture of what it is like in the classroom. it's like the pen throwing incident. I later called and talked to the parent, and her first accusation was, what was I doing? Like, how come I didn't stop it? I must have been doing something wrong. But turning that conversation around and making them understand that, you have 32 kids in the class, and if students are working on activities, you can't control everything. And I'm going to say 9 times out of 10 when I do get a call or an upset parent, it's because my vintage style or simply stylish style of holding students accountable, the parents, hear their students complaining, but in the end, when I talk to them, they want me to hold their students accountable, and I gain their support after talking to them.
Without connection
So yeah, it sounds like communication
is
is
important.
a really important.
And keeping it positive, because the news right now is so overwhelming.
It is.
And 99.9% of my kids found. Now, a month ago, I had that one that was spiraling, and it's so hard when you're in that place to remember the other 99% need you. You can do this. You can show up for them. They're worth it. They are. That's why you're still here. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
I think on top of talking to parents, I have conversations with the students all the time.
Yeah.
When there's a fight on campus or, something happens, having those conversations and just letting them know that it's violence is not an answer, and it's not okay, it's not acceptable.
And that there are other ways of dealing with issues.
Well, and I think also just saying what's really wrong, like even to the kid, like why would you hurt somebody? And they don't think of it like that. They just think, oh, I'm mad, and then giving them language if they're younger, the villain, good guy, bad guy. Then in middle school, like I use a lot of like growing into being an adult and a responsible adult and becoming the self you want to be. Start now. You can become that person. And really, almost every kid I have, except for, let's be honest, if you're a teacher, you have a couple sociopaths, and this will not work with them. But everyone else will rise up because we're going to keep it real,
Well, and I talk to my kids about unintended consequences. And I know I keep going back to this silly pen throwing incident, but the person who threw the pen didn't really intend to poke someone's eye out or damage their eye permanently. And I know I give examples of students fighting, and they're real life examples of students fighting and someone falls the wrong way, they hit their head, and students have died. Now, there's just some things in life you can't rewind or take back like you're in a movie or something. And I think a lot that realism for students, because they've watched so many videos, they've seen real life videos now on YouTube of violence, that they don't realize it. And I say some things you can't take back.
Well, thank you for saying that, because that's what it is. It's consequences. They really don't understand consequences. And back to the horses. That's the thing about the spoiled horses, is there's never a consequence until it escalates to the point that the consequence is serious. And that's why we have to have consequences for the smaller behaviors so that they don't escalate. So that's my takeaway, Kim, thank you, is making sure that there's consequences for smaller offenses, so that the first time they get consequences isn't an extreme consequence like prison or being sent to county or...
Right, because we don't want that for our students.
No, but it's happening, I think.
It's happening because they don't know how to self-regulate. They're not seeing an example of that from society.
Okay, so we didn't solve all the problems, but we're still here, you're still here. Hopefully it made you feel better about teaching and got you, hopefully you feel heard and seen. And I'm sorry if you have to deal with any violence in your classroom or on your campus, or if you feel unsafe. We don't deserve that. We don't deserve a world like this, and we're gonna fight to make it different.
Don't forget to check out your ed code in the state that you work in, and make sure you're in tune with the laws and the requirements, and use what you have available to you to help support you.
We care about you.
Don't give up the fight.
You're worth it, they're worth it.
We need you in the classroom. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Because if you're like Flair, you care.